We have some more breaking news to touch on this Sunday. According to the Associated Press, more than 300 South Korean workers who were detained following a massive immigration raid at a Hyundai plant in Georgia will be released and brought home. That's according to the South Korean government, who made that announcement on Sunday. Presidential chief of staff there said that South Korea and the U.S. had finalized negotiations on the workers' release. He said South Korea plans to send a charter plane to bring the workers home as soon as remaining administrative steps are completed. U.S. immigration authorities on Friday said that they had detained 475 people. Most of them were South Korean nationals when hundreds of federal agents raided Hyundai's sprawling manufacturing site in Georgia, where the Korean automaker Hyundai makes electric vehicles. South Korea's foreign minister later said that more than 300 South Koreans were among the detained. The operation was the latest in a long line of workplace raids conducted as part of the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda. But the one on Thursday is especially distinct because of its large size and the fact that it targeted manufacturing sites that state officials have long called Georgia's largest economic development project. So that is just the latest breaking news from that story that we brought to you earlier this week. The fact that more than 300 South Korean workers that were detained following that massive immigration raid at a Hyundai plant in Georgia will be released and brought home. I want to continue on with some more of these immigration headlines by bringing on here immigration attorney Elizabeth Ricci. She joins us on the show to break it all down. Elizabeth, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I do want to pivot, though. I don't want to specifically ask you about that raid that happened in Georgia. Let's take a live look over here. This is in North Carolina, because the question that I want to ask really corresponds with this. Earlier this week, in a unanimous vote, Durham City Council passed a resolution to make North Carolina a city of, quote, Fourth Amendment workplace. And that was in order to increase protections for city workers against some of these ICE enforcement efforts. Now, Elizabeth, I had never heard that term before. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So the Fourth Amendment is regarding unlawful searches and seizures by the government. So North Carolina is particularly concerned about ICE coming into workplaces and demanding records and demanding employees to arrest for removal. So the concern is that officials want to know, company officials want to know, what rights do they have and do their workers have in that context? And they want to protect themselves and assert their Fourth Amendment rights. So there's a difference between a judicial warrant and an ICE warrant. And I'm actually going to be teaching a class on that to some officials soon. So an ICE warrant does not require probable cause the way a judicial warrant does. An ICE warrant does not allow forced entry the way a judicial warrant does. So it depends on the type of warrant that is presented. And it is very important that employers know the difference so they can inspect the warrants and make sure that they apply to their workplace and that particular date and are legitimate before law enforcement comes into the building to do their inspection and or their arrests.
Several cities across the country we have seen have these concerns when it comes to these raids that are happening. Why haven't we seen this been adopted before? And can we expect more of that in the coming weeks?
I think it wasn't expected before. I think employers thought that they were immune from this type of raid, but as we saw in Georgia recently with the Hyundai plant, that's not the case, although it is the workers who are being targeted and not the employers. And I think we will see more and more municipalities and states be concerned about their companies and their workers and assert those Fourth Amendment rights against unlawful searches and seizures. It's going to be much more commonplace, I expect.
I do want to move on here to another headline regarding immigration and bringing us out to this live image that we have over in Washington, D.C. Earlier this week, we did see a legal aid group that was based in Arizona. So they have sued the Trump administration and the DOJ to preemptively block them from deporting a dozen Honduran children. We're going to follow this story closely, but Elizabeth, I want you to break it down for us a little bit here. When it comes to migrant children here that are, well, the DOJ is trying to deport them, how does that legal process work?
So children are in a unique position. They can often request a benefit called special immigrant juvenile if they've been declared a dependent of the state. In other words, they don't have a parent in the United States who can care for them. but they need to get an order from a family law court first. And if they are in deportation or removal, they're not really that different from that adult defendant. And what I do want to be clear about is that immigration violations are civil, they're not criminal. So those children do not have a right to an attorney in those proceedings. And we have seen cases of 5-year-olds defending themselves in immigration court, and that's a problem.
And then just continuing on with that whole process, let's say they are deported. Is there any kind of steps that are taken to ensure that those children are reunited with family members?
Not necessarily. And often they don't have family members. Sometimes the family members are in the United States or they're deceased. And that's why getting that special immigrant juvenile court order from the family law court in the United States is so helpful, so that if they are removed, they're not just dropped off and having to fend for themselves as toddlers or small children.
All right, we're going to say with some more of this news regarding the Trump administration, back out live to this image of the White House. Earlier this week, we saw a federal judge, this happening in San Francisco. They blocked the Trump administration from ending temporary legal protections that have been granted to more than 1 million people from Haiti and Venezuela. They had been granted there the right to live and work in the United States. Break that down for us, Elizabeth. When it comes to that protection status, why was that granted in the first place, and what does it entail?
So you're referring to TPS, temporary protective status, which is basically a protection for people in the United States so they do not have to return to their home countries that are experiencing civil strife, natural disaster, that type of thing. And the Secretary of Homeland Security this week said that they've reviewed the conditions in Venezuela and that they no longer merit TPS, which, if you have any Venezuelan friends or family members, as I do, you'd know that, things like toilet paper are hard to come by. People have basically no rights even to use their own homes. So that's disingenuous. But in any event, so TPS was granted for people from Haiti, from Venezuela, because they met those conditions. And now the secretary is saying that, one, those conditions have improved, which they have not. But two, that TPS was being used as a magnet to come to the United States, which does not fall within the reasoning to be able to justify the termination of TPS. In addition, courts have said that the president and the secretary were using the Alien Enemies Act to justify terminating TPS for 600,000 Venezuelans and additional Haitians. And a federal judge determined that there was no invasion of foreign government, which is the requirement to be able to invoke that act. But the Supreme Court, on the other hand, has said that the president can terminate TPS. So we see that Venezuelans and Haitians especially are going to be in a limbo in these coming days and weeks, because we have different courts making different conflicting decisions about who can stay and who must go.
That's really interesting. And I feel like the next question would be, why is this not sort of an open and shut case? And really, who is going to be listened to when it comes to that decision? But we'll dive deeper on that in a later segment, Elizabeth, because I do want to get to one more story here. And that is concerning Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So that case is still continuing on here. But the latest is the fact that immigration enforcement saying Friday in a letter that they intend to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the African nation of Eswatini after he expressed a fear of deportation to Uganda. So, Elizabeth, are we just going to keep going down different nations in Africa to try to send Kilmar to?
It certainly seems like it. The reason that he was not going to be, it looks like, going to Uganda was because he asserted a claim for asylum. And I think he'll do the same for Eswatini, formerly Swaziland. And reason being that he will experience persecution based on the media attention, everything that's happened to him in the United States, and that he would not be safe there. So this is just a case that's been compounded with errors and legal maneuverings over and over that really have complicated his legal profile. But it does look like that's the location where they want to send him, because he declined a deal to go to Costa Rica.
So, Elizabeth, I know that you do teach some classes sometimes. When we look at Kilmar Abrego's case here, how do you talk to your students about that, especially because, as you've mentioned before, it's very unprecedented what we have seen here?
Well, I'm not teaching this semester, particularly because everything is changing so quickly. And I do have a law practice and a family, and I would have to basically redo the curriculum every lesson. But this particular case is unbelievable because it all stemmed from an error by the administration that they were not willing to own up to. And they have just continued to double down and double down. This individual has no convictions. He has a citizen family, and he is the poster child for how not to effectuate a legal case.
Immigration attorney Elizabeth Ricci, we're always glad to have you here on the show. A lot of headlines to get to every single week, so we appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Of course.